Welcome to the Michigan Golfer Show. Join us each week as we explore the people, the places, and the events that shape our great game.
Hi, I'm Jennie McCafferty at Forest Dunes Golf Resort in Roscommon, Michigan, and I'm here with Jack Barry and Tom Doak. And we're mostly here to talk with Tom about golf course design because he's one of the great golf course architects of our time. And Tom, I have to ask you this. Your company is called Renaissance Golf Design, and I think that's a perfect name because you yourself kind of exemplify that whole idea. You're a great photographer, and you write a lot. In fact, how do you balance all the writing and the photography, and then, oh, by the way, designing great golf courses?
Well, I've always liked to write, and I've always kind of felt like I wouldn't be in the golf business unless I was a good writer. I mean, I started without any family connections business at all. So when I was in college, I started writing letters to people in the golf business asking for advice. And because nobody had written them letters like that before, and because I could write and I seemed like I had some idea what I was doing, I got a lot of help. I got answers from Dean Beeman and Ben Crenshaw and Herbert Warren Wind and Pete Dye. And that's how I wound up working for Mr. Dye, was just writing him letters until he had to hire me, or I just keep writing him letters all the time. One of the letters I wrote was to the editor of Golf Magazine. I was like 18 years old and a sophomore in college, and they had this ranking of the 50 best courses in the world. And I wrote him like a 3-page letter of what all was wrong with that ranking and how they'd done it. And he wrote me back and said, well, you're 18 and you're not, I'm not going to put you in charge of this, but you can obviously write. And would you like to try writing something for the magazine? So I wrote my first feature article for Golf Magazine when I was 19. So my mom was an editor. I was kind of taught how to write as a kid. And it's something I've always enjoyed. And it was really an entree to the business because unlike golf course architecture, where somebody has to trust you with millions of dollars to go out and build something, as long as you can write at any age, and people read the byline and they don't need your whole bio and like a list of financial references to say, okay, he can write, let him write.
Well, I think one of the things that makes your writing so interesting and why people buy your books is you have opinions. And the opinions are, it's not anybody's boilerplate. It's not anybody's marketing speak. You go right to the point, and sometimes you make points that are not just interesting, but maybe a little bit critical. And that's unusual in the golf business.
Or make a joke about it. And people were fascinated because they never read anything like that. Nobody had really written critical reviews of golf courses before. The magazines don't do it. They don't want to offend a place that might be a potential advertiser. And that's the problem, because the only things you read about in golf magazines are either good, better, or best. There is nothing below really good. They make everything sound the same. You will rarely see anything that's even slightly controversial. The Confidential Guide was a sensation. People started making photocopies of it and giving it to their friends. And, there was a demand for it. I still was uneasy about publishing it. When a publisher first called me about trying to do the book, I gave it to him and said, I don't think you're going to want to publish this in this form, but I'll let you read it. And sure enough, they came back to me and said, yeah, it's really well written, but we wouldn't know how to market that book. But would you be interested in writing another book? And that's the anatomy of a golf course. That's how it came to be. I said, well, nobody's really written a book about the how-to of golf course architecture since George Thomas and Tom Simpson and those guys in the 20s. And they said, well, yeah, that's more what we were thinking. And we could actually, we might even be able to sell that to libraries and places like that. So yeah, we'll why don't you try writing that? And I spent about a year working on that, and I think it was published in 1992, so it's been like 25 years.
It's kind of a Bible, really.
It amazes me that the publisher did more outdoors books, and they told me in the beginning, we don't know the golf business that well, so we're not going to sell a lot of these right off the bat, but we'll keep it in print, and it'll hopefully it keeps selling over time. And sure enough, it's sold 45 or 50,000 copies now over 20 years. And yeah, pretty much everybody who's interested in golf course architecture has that book. It's even been translated. It's been translated in like 5 languages. Chinese, Korean, Japanese, Finnish, which I don't really understand.
Well, it's interesting to think about that, but fast forward a little bit, and you did come out with a really spectacular version of Confidential Guide to Golf Courses with fabulous photographs and very heavy, nice paper. And Volume 3 is out. Volume 4 is due next year, and I think the final one is Volume 5. Is that right?
Yes. Actually, we're going to do Volume 5 before Volume 4 just because of the places that I'm traveling right now. Business takes me to Australia and New Zealand and Asia more than Europe right now.
That's going to drive the librarians crazy.
Yes, it will. But I had all of them in order on the back, so I have to, it has to be Volume 5 next.
So how's the reception been for this?
Good. I'm a little surprised it hasn't sold more copies as fast. But again, like the other book I was talking about, I'm not in a hurry to sell them. It's something that I think will have a long shelf life. The last version of that book was out of print for a long time. When I really started doing golf courses as a career, people said, well, you should be careful and not, writing a book like that is conflict of interest to talk about other designers and what they do. And I didn't necessarily agree with that, but I backed off. My reputation was controversial enough. So for years I didn't write anything other than maybe online, and sort of stayed away from it and just built my golf courses. And that book got to be a collector's item. I mean, people were paying like $800 or $1,000 for a copy, which told me that I was a dummy for, I made $3 a book off those originally. So maybe I should have a piece of this at a bigger scale. And B, there was still a demand for it because, to my surprise, nobody else had taken that concept and copied it. I figured there'd be 10 other people writing their opinions of all golf courses, and you really haven't seen that much of that. So this time, to take a little of the heat off myself, and because I've got to write about my own courses too, I've enlisted 3 co-authors. Rand Morissette, who runs Golf Club Atlas, Darius Oliver from Australia, who's got his own website and has written great books about golf courses under the Planet Golf name, and Masa Nishijima, a longtime friend from Japan. Between the 3 of us, we've seen about 2,500 golf courses. So it's not one book. That would be a little too thick. It's a series of 5 books, and we're 3 books into it. And now are the hard ones because they're the places in Asia and Europe where I haven't traveled as much. So I'm leaning on my co-authors a little more, but I'm also trying to give myself time. Part of the reason for doing it was just there were still places I wanted to see, and I needed an impetus to go. That's why I made it into a project again. It's like, I want to do this, and if I don't do it pretty soon, I'm not going to. Now, ask my wife why I would think I want to travel more than my job already demands. Maybe a sign that I don't know what I'm doing, but it's been a blast to go see some of these places. I mean, I never would have gone to Korea, or I went to Nepal to see a golf course, and a tremendous golf course at that. And some things that really made me wonder, if, it's not just giving me ideas for what I might do building a golf course again someday. It's actually like giving me ideas about where the business is going. And, not everybody can afford to build the expensive golf courses that we've been building in the last 20 years. Nepal is actually a place where golf makes more sense because it's not, the golf business would like to see more golf in Southeast Asia and South America. But it's hot there. Being outdoors for 4 or 5 hours is not as appealing, and that's why they don't have as many golf courses. It's just a tough sell in certain climates. Nepal is a beautiful place for golf. It's actually, and you actually play in the winter. You would think it's the dead opposite, but the winter is the dry season there, and even though the Himalayas are right there. The land leading up to the Himalayas is only 3,000, 4,000 feet above sea level. That's why it's so dramatic. You're playing golf at 4,000 feet, and you're looking at a 25,000-foot mountain that's only like 30 miles away.
Well, one of the things that makes it interesting is you can look for courses that you've seen or played on or hope to go to, and it's fun to just kind of open a page at random, and it's always fun. But I have to ask this. Can you explain the Doak scale?
It's funny, my wife says about that book, that would be a really good book without all those numbers in it. And she's got a point, because the main thing we really want you to do is read the reviews. And, reducing everything to a number is not the be-all and end-all of discussion of golf course architecture. But when you're reading about 50 golf courses in Scotland and trying to figure out which ones you're going to fit into your next trip, it does help to have some basis of comparison. And I hope you read the reviews and think, well, that sounds interesting. And he only gives that a 5 or a 6, but I've seen some other 5s. Those are pretty good courses. Maybe we'll go there instead of just seeing all the ones that are rated 7s and 8s. So the numbers started as a shorthand, and even you can tell from the definitions of them. I mean, those definitions are meant to be funny. Our friend Dave Richards, who does PR for the golf courses up here, is in my book, because he, when I said I was rating all the golf courses from 1 to 10, he said, well, what's a 2? Just play it in a scramble and drink a lot of beer? And that's the official definition.
Of the 2. Well, there are so many things that are fun, but the photography itself is fun. What was your process for picking photographs for all these great?
When I did the very first edition of the book, there were no photos. And the first time I published it years ago, there were color photos, and they were nearly all mine. I'd been trying to take pictures of courses to remember them when I was traveling in my 20s, and I got to be friendly with a couple of the golf photographers. Brian Morgan especially is a good friend. So he kind of critiqued my work a little bit, and more than that, because I used to have a kind of photographic memory in the literal sense, I would see Brian's pictures of famous golf courses and think, okay, he put himself right about here. But how did he get the sun to come up through that tree? Because it's not coming up there today. And then I realized, well, what time of year you take pictures has an influence too. But, I kind of got to be good by imitating his photography and a couple other people's, and got an eye for it. And Mr. Dye used to send me to take pictures of his courses, because I would try to take a picture that you could tell how the hole played. It wasn't just a pretty picture, that you could actually see something about the golf course. And that's what I've tried to do. The funny thing now is I never imagined 25 years ago that, you could crowdsource photos on the internet the way you can now. Half the photos in the new version of the confidential guide, I've just solicited online from people in return for a copy of the book, and you wouldn't believe how many people just send me all kinds of photos for possible inclusion. So it's really helped the book a lot. A picture is worth 1,000 words.
One of the things that's remarkable about your photos is they show elevation differences, which is really hard to pull off in a photograph.
It is, and that's one of the things, I said I'm trying to show how the golf hole works, and that's a big part of golf, and it's something that doesn't always show up, even on television. I mean, anybody that's been to Augusta National at all, the first impression of actually going there is, my God, it's way hillier than I thought. I've been watching it on TV for 20 years, and I can't believe how hilly it is. Because that doesn't show up with the camera very well, especially in the middle of the day when they're on TV.
So it's a pretty good trick. It's very successful here. So
We try. I don't even know what my trick is to make it work, but we do try.
Okay, let's talk about this one, Tom Doak's Little Red Book of Golf Course Architecture. Just a little bit of a play on the name of Harry Pinnock's Little Red Book of how to.
Yes, and I've got a couple of friends who are shocked that I would steal the title from Harvey Pinnock. I sort of said something in the foreword. I think he stole it from Chairman Mao.
Play golf. Well, this one has a fun story. Can you tell us the story of how this book came to?
Yeah, well, as I said, when I started being taken more seriously as an architect, I had to put writing aside for a while. But it's part of me. I still like to write, and my main outlet for writing the last 15 years until just recently was online, especially a discussion group on golf course architecture that a friend of mine runs. So I'm on there to answer people's questions about my courses and things that I've seen, and they just like to talk about architecture in general. And it's funny when you talk to your peers about golf course architecture. It's all kind of, everybody's jaded and they all think they have it all figured out. You actually think more when average golfers ask you questions. It's just they ask in a different way, and their perspective is different. So it makes you think a little bit about what you're doing. So I've been writing little snippets about golf course architecture online for years, and never recording any of them or writing them down, but they're all still there. And a few years ago, a friend who's on that website started collecting some of my stuff. He had done a calendar where he collected quotes about golf course architecture, and he was starting to collect mine. So over the last 8 or 10 years, he's been compiling a bunch of things whenever he saw something he thought was good. There's a lot of stuff on the cutting room floor, but 15 years worth of contributions left a lot of stuff. And so he sent all this material for me, kind of very loosely organized. And at first I was like, no, I don't want to hear all the criticism if I'm going to write another book. Who does he think he is? But then he sent all the stuff to me, and I was like, boy, there's some good stuff in here. And so it took a while for us to pare it down into a book that was readable. But, what we tried to do is similar to the Confidential Guide. It's a book that you can just pick up and read a couple of pages anytime you want, and it's very short subjects. And we just tried to organize it in a way that it's not all logical from beginning to end, but if you're reading about one subject, the other stuff about that subject will be kind of close by instead of 100 pages later.
It's not necessarily apparent that it's organized, but everything's fun, and that's one of the things that comes through each of the pieces that's included here. It's fun. You had fun writing it, and it makes me want to go out and play golf.
Well, that's a real compliment. I started using that word fun in trying to market my work 25 years ago, because people didn't, so many architects are really good players, and they think most about challenging other golfers and challenging their peers that they play golf with all the time. And then they just try to put in other tees to make it playable for the average golfer. But their goal is more about challenging people than letting people have fun. And, I was never that good. And I've been around a lot of golfers that aren't that good either. But they're out there. My mom could barely get the ball airborne in the 20 years that I watched her play golf, but she still loved to be outdoors on a golf course, and she thought she thought they were beautiful places. And you want to build things that appeal to people like that. I mean, you want to appeal to as many people as possible, and not just the people that are grinding to try to break 80. If those were your entire market, you'd be in trouble.
So I want to wrap up the Little Red Book by what's possibly the shortest item in here, which is the last one. It's called the short version. Everything you need to learn about golf architecture is in Scotland.
Yeah, I think that's true on a lot of levels. The Scots only care if a golf course is good. They don't care what par is. They don't care if it's 5,000 yards long. They don't care if it's 18. I've seen a couple of 12-hole golf courses in Scotland that they think are fine courses. And, trying to tell them about how it should be is crazy.
I can only think of one course in the United States, although I'm sure there are more, is Bandon Preserve. So it's 13 hole par 3. So I think that's the name of it.
That's right. Bill and Ben built that course, and I've had people tell me that's the best course at Bandon Dunes. They've got 4 golf courses in the top 100 in the world, but they have more fun going out and playing a par 3 course in an 8-some at the end of the day than they do grinding away on one of the big courses.
I think we're going to be talking a little bit more about Bandon Dunes. But in terms of books, you have 2 more in the series of The Confidential Guide. Is there anything else percolating for your future about books?
There actually is. The other book that I've wanted to do is a book about routing golf courses, which is a really tough subject because if you talk about it in general terms, it sounds very vague and it's hard to relate. So the only way to do it is case studies, and so I'm going to do a book that's both retrospective on my own courses and how they got to be. Why the first hole is there and why the first green is there instead of out the other end. And, how we had to change our mind and put things together differently because the client wanted something a little different. But how the holes fit together and why we chose those places. And, I know that nobody's really written that book before. And, I've got somebody helping edit for me to try to keep me on task of, no, you're not explaining this in detail enough for average people. You're skipping over like 10 things here. You need to go back and talk about why that's a green site instead of just there's a green site right there. So it's going to take a while, but I'm really looking forward to working on that.
Look forward to it. Thank you so much for talking with us.
Thank you.